So we're going to start chapter 2, PyBasic. So first thing to do is, as I stated earlier, download the shell file, chapter 2 PyBasic shell, and open it in Jupyter Notebook. And I have it here in this folder. So I'm going to open that. And you'll see that that file has marked down cells containing notes as to what we're going to be covering in this chapter, and then there are some empty cells. That is where we will be coding Python code and running the code in the empty cells. Now I'm going to open the PDF file for the textbook, and you should. My notes is it follows the textbook chapter 2. Okay, so you need to follow what I'm covering with the textbook as well. So textbook has more information and I'm only covering the important ones. Then you need to really read the textbook to get a full understanding of the concepts that we're going to be covering. So keep the textbook file handy and refer back to it as we work through the problems. Okay, so there are two basic commands or concepts that we need to understand before we get started. There is what is called tab completion and introspection. Tab completion is when you can use the tab to complete what you're typing. So you start typing an object name in Python, for example, and if that object name is already in the namespace, or it could be a command or method of Python. Then you start typing and you press the tab key, Python will give you a list of possible completions for what you started typing. So you don't have to type the whole thing. So it helps speed up your typing and more efficient, and also it helps in avoiding typos. So if you see a command and you just select it, then you don't have to type the whole thing and make mistakes. So that's tab completion. Now introspection is to look at the object and try to understand what type of object a Python object is and some basic information about the object. And you do that by a question mark and the name of the object. Or it could be the name of the object with the question mark at the end. You can put the question mark at either side. And then Python will give you, or Notebook will give you some basic information about the object at the bottom of the screen. So I'll show you an example now. Now let's create an object. Say we'll set b equal to 1, 2, 3. So it's a list, and we'll talk more about list later on. So now we create that, and then in the next line, let's put a question mark and b. Now run this code. Okay, how do you run the code? There are 3 different ways. Okay, Alt Enter, Shift Enter, Control Enter. Okay, so now I did Control Enter. So now it gives you the type, which is list, and it contains 1, 2, 3, and the length is 3 elements. So it gives you some basic information at the bottom. Then you can close this by Xing out. So this is called introspection. And you can use introspection for any object that you create or any method that Python gives you, or any function name or any of that. Then you can get some basic information about the object or method or function. Now let's look at some basic Python language elements. Okay, so there is language, semantics. So in Python, we use white space a lot. And in regular programming, on other programming languages, when we use a function like a if function or a do loop and things like that, we start the command and then enclose the code that needs to be run as a block within, say, something like squiggly brackets or regular brackets like in Excel when you do an if function, then you put left parenthesis and then you write the information for the if function and then close parenthesis. Whereas in Python, you don't do any of that. So in Python, we use a colon to indicate that we have completed a line of a specific command from Python or method from Python. Say, if some condition and then a colon, okay, or while some condition and a colon. The colon indicates that if function or the while function or whatever, okay, that condition is done and then the code comes afterwards. So when you do that, then you have to tab each line of code. Okay, so it's automatic in Notebook. When you put a colon and then you press the enter key, then you'll automatically be indented. And if you don't indent properly, then Python will throw an error. But as long as you just follow what the Notebook does, because Notebook will automatically produce those indentations, and then you just type from there onwards. You have to be very careful. If the indentation is not done properly, then the code will not run. So that is one semantic that we need to be aware of. So we'll go through lots and lots of examples of that later on. And next is comment. We use the pound sign and then type the comment. So once the pound sign is appears, then everything that follows the pound sign is ignored. So a comment, when you have a large amount of comment and you have lots of explanation to do, you will do that in a markdown. But if it's just a simple single comment, then you do it in a code cell itself. So you start with the pound sign and type the comment that you want. Okay. And the main difference is that this is done in a code cell, not in a markdown cell. So if you have a pound sign and then what you type is ignored. And you can do this even in a line of code, not just a complete line of comment. So if you have a code like, for example, you type a equal to something, so 8, and then you want a small note here to say that you're setting 8 to 8. So after that code segment, then you can put a comment by typing pound sign and then type whatever text that you want. So a comment in a code cell can be an entire line starting with the pound sign, or it can be part of a line of code. Okay, after the code ends, then you can put a pound sign and write a comment. So anything that appears after the pound sign is treated as comment and it will not be executed by Python. Now let's look at another example. So here we have A. We are going to display what A is, and then a pound sign, and then what that command is supposed to do. When we run this code, and then you'll see that A will get set to 8 and A will be displayed, but the rest of the line will not be executed. Remember, once again, let me repeat, this is a code cell. This is not a markdown cell. Okay, so if you, in a code cell, if you do not have a pound sign, then that line will be treated as code, and if Python doesn't understand it, okay, like here I removed the pound sign, if I run the cell, Python will throw an error because it's going to treat the first line as a line of code and it doesn't understand the code. So it will give you an error. So in a code cell, if you want a comment, then you need to start with a pound sign. And once you enter a pound sign, everything that comes after that will be ignored by Python. Now let's look at a multi-line comment. So if you have a large multi-line comment, it's better to use markdown cell and put that separately. But in Python, you can if it's a short multi-line comment that can be uh, done using three quotation mark. It can be single quote or double quote. Okay, so like this, and then you type your comment, multi-line comment. So when you have three quotation marks, um, and then Python will allow you to type string, multi-line string. So it's actually a multi-line string, and since we're not assigning it to any particular variable, so it will be treated as just a string and will not execute as a code. So like for example, here multi-line comment, line 1, line 2, line 3, and then you execute that, then Python will not throw an error because this is just a little string, and the slash backslash n is the return character, or line feed character, the next line character.